Thank you, Enrico. It's the second time I participate in Athanasios Eco Week. It's an honor. I would like to make my presentation in Greek, although you will excuse my mistakes because I have been living abroad for 30 years. I will be very brief. Based on my experience abroad in terms of smart cities, I would like to share with you some knowledge. I'm not going to talk about solutions. Why is that? Because usually we tend to rush to solutions without having studied the problem. So I would like to further deepen into the problem, into the analysis of the problem. I'm not going to talk in detail about this map. We all know that urbanization is a thing, cities get bigger. What we should take into account is how the urban development puts pressure and impacts on infrastructure, because such infrastructure quite often is not renovated. So you can see in this chart the main infrastructure in various regions and continents around the world. So you can see that some of them are in the red zone, which is the most critical condition. So we cannot be talking about sustainable or smart cities with old, obsolete infrastructure. So this is part of the problem as well. Have you understood how quickly this world is changing? That's should be taken for given. We call it now a VUCA word, meaning volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. So V stands for volatility, instability. U stands for uncertainty. It's not only about change. This change makes things uncertain, hard to predict. C stands for complexity. We're talking about interconnection between all problems. So what's this complex context for which solutions should be proposed? And A stands for ambiguity. Quite often we cannot have a crystal clear understanding of the problem, and you'll see that in the cooperations between municipalities. They have a different understanding of the same problem because they adopt a different perspective. So how we communicate is very important. That will allow us to come up with solutions. It would be equally interesting if you have the time to follow the Global Economic Forum, the World Economic Forum, which prepares the Global Risk Report. This report includes the major challenges for the future. This can be very helpful to get an overview, a full overview about how the world around us is changing and what's the impact on your audience. This is just a chart that shows you how the World Economic Forum classifies these risks in categories. And this week I heard different challenges. Climate change, lionfish, but what is not mentioned quite a lot is how all these problems are interconnected. And we need to understand that it's a systemic problem, and this systemic problem needs to be perceived as such and find similar solutions. Lionfish on its own is not a problem on its own. Infrastructure is not an isolated problem. No, all of these things have to be studied and explored together. And I would like to focus on this chart. Have you ever seen this equation? It was first shared by Bill Gates. It talks about CO2 and links it to 4 parameters. And it's interesting to take a look at them. The first parameter is people, the number of people on Earth, the population. The more the people, the more services we need to provide to these people. Services per person spent energy per service, which leads to the consumption of CO2 per unit energy. So CO2 is very much related to the population and services. We don't want to cut down on services. We want to be able to provide services to people, because this is the quality of a society. It depends on the services provided to its people. But as the number of services increases, the development of technology might help us to save energy and thus have fewer CO2 emissions. So our quality of life is linked to this equation, and we need to understand this, to grasp this concept. It's possibly one of the most important parameters to understand that the services we are offered have an impact to CO2 emissions, and we do want these services. I have worked in projects such as the NEOM project. There are various projects that envision an ideal future, and they use technology to achieve it. But when I talk about smart cities, my question is, are smart cities only dependent on technology? So people get to ask me this question as well. Are smart cities only technological services? Imagine a smart city with a black cloud. Is it a smart city? NEOM, for example. Have you heard about this project? This project has practically stopped due to the geopolitical risks that have risen in the Middle East. It was a 10-year-old project which is still underway, but my point is that projects depend on the conditions, geopolitical ones around them. What is a smart city or region? But that's not the question. The actual question is, what really is a smart city region? And if we do ask this question, if we fully grasp the problem and the context of a city or a region, then we will be able to come up with some solutions and see whether these solutions are feasible and good for the community in question. I don't have a lot of slides, but because I know there is not a lot of time, but I would like to share an experience with you. We've studied a lot of cities. We've also researched a lot the following question: how cities can survive when conditions change. So we chose 3 different events that happened in the past in order to define smart. Is it just technology? One of these case studies was New Orleans. You probably know what happened with the Katrina hurricane back in 2005 and how the city was destroyed. But it was in the US, an advanced developed country, where citizens believed they were safe. And they believed that the state will provide everything to them if something bad happens. They wouldn't expect to lose everything overnight. The same happens in many countries, Greece included. So it's a very developed country. But why I focus on this case study? Because I've learned from my experience is that smart cities equal smart citizens. Smart administration follows. But smart citizens have to be trained to think smartly. Smart citizens have a different mindset. People were sitting in their homes waiting to be saved. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to cope with that, with the problem that came up. Another case study was the Fukushima 2011 earthquake. It was an earthquake and then the tsunami and the nuclear plant, as you might remember. But here there was something different. We saw how the Japanese trained their children from a very young age. They are trained in a different way of thinking, in a different behavior pattern. Here is a distraction, but you can see this is the Keimashi Junior High School miracle. And why we call it a miracle? Because when the earthquake happened, they were already trained and they started running towards the mountain and they were all saved. They had been trained to do that, contrary to New Orleans, where they didn't have similar knowledge and experience. This demonstrates why training is so important and why it should start from children. Solutions begin there. Having solutions proposed by engineers is not enough, because these solutions become obsolete very quickly because conditions change, technology changes. It's all about making children think differently. They should survive when conditions change. The third case study, and most important one, which changed completely my way of thinking, was from an island complex. And I'm talking, of course, the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami and the disaster that followed it. But very few of you know this island, the so-called Sentinelese Island. It's an island in the Indian Ocean which was practically drowned by the tsunami, but it has hills as well. There are some indigenous people living on that island still using arrows and bows, but what we've learned about them? When the rescue crews went on the island, they believed that everybody would be dead. They thought that if Indonesia had so many deaths, there is no chance that everyone on the island would have survived. But all the residents were alive on the island. And why was that? Because they were able to read the nature, to see the signs of the nature, as our grandfathers and ancestors knew when it would rain. I believe that I need sensors and technology, and still I'm not able to 100% predict weather. I'm not saying that we should go back to Stone Age, but it shows how important knowledge is and how important it is for this knowledge to be disseminated among citizens, people. And that's important for us when we propose solutions. We have to take also into account how people can respond to these solutions. Because if citizens are not able to respond to them, these solutions are not smart at all. So to conclude with my presentation, I would like just to share this chart with you. This chart shows that each community, each city has different needs. And based on that, the relevant investments are made. Here are 4 different grades. A city that's just starting to develop has different needs compared to a city that's fully developed. So based on this framework, solutions can be proposed. So that's my last slide. So what is actually smart? And when we realize what smart is, we redefined our entire way of thinking. Now we believe that smart should be holistic. So SMART stands for S, sustainable. And to be sustainable, you need measurable and manageable results. You cannot be talking about a smart city if you don't have measurable data. When do a city reduces its CO2 emissions? You need to know that. Third one, agile, flexible. So we need to adjust to new conditions. Also, smart cities should be resilient and they should use technology. So it's not technology that drives smart cities. It's the last factor, which of course should be in place. So that's all on my part. It was just food for thought. So I would like now to give the floor to Kostas. Back to Kostas. Thank you very much for your attention.